The Sun has a really great story about HS2, which we talk about a lot on this show because it's costing so much. And they said they've done a map, basically, and they said, look, the top of it is supposed to go to Manchester and the bottom of it is supposed to go to, can you see by my hand, London Euston. And Steph, they seem to be saying they might not get to the top or the bottom.
Do you know what? Stop it. Let's put that money that's been earmarked into something else, because this is just not what it was proposed to start with, is it? Look at this fantastic... I mean, I live in the north of England. If I get the train, say, from Doncaster to London, it will take me on average 1 hour 35, 1 hour 40, which is good enough for me. And I'm thinking, well, this could be fantastic. It's going to be so quick. It's going to let me get to London quicker. But actually, look at it. I don't think it's even coming to Leeds now, is it? And then it's not even going to come into Euston. So you would have to get off at Old Oak Common, then use the Elizabeth line to come into London.
I don't even know where Old Oak Common is.
I don't.
Where's West London? I looked it up before I came. I didn't know either. But it's sort of north of White City. So it's not exactly...
I see. So it's in London, but it's basically west, a good way west of the centre.
Exactly. You're going to have to take the Elizabeth line to come in. So the time you're going to save by taking the quicker HS2 will be negated by the fact you've got to...
Just stop it, scrap it. And the money that's been earmarked, put into something else.
But if you scrap it, the people I feel sorry for are people who had family homes on the route, and they might have been in them for 50 years. They were compulsorily purchased. They're now empty, and now they're told they're not even going to be near a tray line. I don't know. I don't know what this picture's of. You know, basically, this is sort of London area. It's very hard to say. Well, none of this was happening anymore. Why can't we do this stuff, Ali?
Well, the thing is, look, I believe in investing in infrastructure. I think it's a great enabler of prosperity and growth and levelling up and all this stuff. I think it's a great thing to do. However, you've got to look at cost-benefit. And at the moment, it's an equation that doesn't really work right now. The problem is, with all of these big projects, some people are saying in the papers, why doesn't the private sector finance this? Well, the reason why the private sector can't finance such a gargantuan project, which is with a cost of over 100 billion, is because the risks are just too great. The tunnelling, the complexity, the planning consents. The other problem we've got is we live in a democracy, great thing, but we can't do what China does, which is steamroller things through, get them done quickly. That's why you have Crossrail, 4 years over budget and 3 billion over budget. Because we're not very good at delivering these things.
I mean, I was on Crossrail the other day. It looked like a normal tube line. They bumped into some skeletons all the way or something, did they? Is that? I mean, that's why it went over. I don't know why you can't say, look, this is how much it's going to cost. If you get building work done, Storm, you wouldn't accept a 3 billion overrun.
No, you wouldn't, absolutely, but you would fix your cost, and I suppose you would get three or four people bidding for it, which I'm presuming they did. I don't understand. I think people just see an endless money pot when they see the government, and so it keeps going up and up and up and up and up.
Storm, you're right. The problem is we call it a fixed price, date certain, turnkey project, which means you literally turn the key and the contractor takes all the risk and delivers you a project. The problem with these big ones is it's so complicated. There are multiple contractors. No one's going to take that one risk on their own without being backstopped by the government. That's why we're in the mess we're in.
OK, Storm, this is one for you.
I think so, yeah. We'd love your calls on this. We'll be speaking about it more in Jeremy Vine Extra. Should HS2 be scrapped now? What do you think? Should HS2 be scrapped? Now, The Sun is reporting that the multi-billion-pound high-speed rail route linking London to the north might not actually reach central London. Now, this isn't the first route change affecting the project. Let's have a look. So here's where we started. As you can see, HS2 had two starting points in the north, Manchester Piccadilly in the west, Leeds in the east. They converged to get to Birmingham, and then that went on to central London to Euston specifically. But since then, we have learnt that the link between Leeds and Sheffield, the brown line here, that's been scrapped. It's also thought that the link between Manchester Piccadilly and Birmingham could also be scrapped. And then to top it off, what we've learnt more recently is that the last little leg of the journey to central London may not quite get there either. So the route might stop at Old Oak Common, which is, well, nobody really knows where that is, 5 miles away from Euston. So, Simon, you actually live on this route.
Yeah.
Do you think we need to continue with it, or does it need to be scrapped? Now, it has been chopped and changed about.
The whole thing's an unmitigated disaster. I mean, it should never have happened, but it is happening, and it carries on happening. You're right, I live very near to it. Fortunately, I cannot see it from where I am, but I drove past it this morning on the way here. It is massive through the Chilterns, which is where I live, so near Wendover, Great Missenden, Roald Dahl's old town. Huge amounts of work around there. How do you go about reversing that? If you decide, OK, enough's enough, it's not going to deliver on what it was originally going to be all about. It's now not even going to start in central London. I was working out on As the Crow Flies this morning from Euston to the new starting point. It's around about 7 miles. So that 27 minutes, I think you save going from London Euston to Birmingham.
You're going to spend it on
You're probably going to
line?
spend it on that anyway. So from the start, it was a bad idea. The question I have is if you go, OK, let's scrap it. Well, first of all, of the phase 1 money that was put aside, which was, I think, the original target, that's undoubtedly changed, was 40.3 million, 8 billion, I should say. 18 billion of that has already been spent. So that's gone. And what do you do about the work that's already been done? So the Chiltern Tunnel, which I think I'm right in saying is going to be 10 miles long, that's already been dug very near to where we live. Those huge machines that built the likes of the Channel Tunnel and the Elizabeth line under London, they are pushing forward. They think, last time I looked, just before Christmas, had made 4 miles. What do you do with that? What do you do with all the houses, the pubs along the routes to Wendover that we drive through?
The ancient woodland that's been torn down.
Yeah, that have been purchased. People have been moved away, compulsory purchase orders on businesses, on houses. What are you going to say to those? Sorry about this. It's not a good idea, so we're going to scrap it.
So, Simon, you would say we're too far in?
It's like a horse bolting and you let it run for 5 miles and then you suddenly decide we ought to get the horse back. Well, it's too late. The horse is gone.
But Emily, when when you make a bad decision, if indeed this is a bad decision, once you've realised it's a bad decision, you should really stop doing it, shouldn't you?
Yeah, I mean, the way you presented what's been going on with this line and the bits and pieces that they're chopping and changing, it does look like the most epic failure in terms of a government infrastructure project. The whole point of it was to level up, I thought, and now they're chopping and changing the bits that are in the north that would actually help those northern towns, linking up Leeds, Manchester, Sheffield, etc., etc. I mean, the counter to your point, Simon, would be that that's the sunk cost fallacy, that just because we've already put some money in, therefore we should just continue on regardless of whether it's going to balloon even further and whether it's even needed. So you would still be saving money if you did say, hang on a minute, we need to rethink this.
Simon doesn't just talk about the money, though. He talks about the people that have had to move out their homes that they've potentially lived in for generations, ancient woodland that's been knocked down, the creation of tunnels, the creation of networks that are already starting. Would you just cover that all up?
The other thing is, there's a hill very near Wendover where we often go for a walk, and we went there New Year's Day as a family, and it overlooks Chequers as well, so it's always nice to have a bit of a snoop.
I know the area. My grandmother used to live
see
there.
if the PM's at home, but you get a real vista of the land below disappearing into the distance as it heads north. And you can see HS2 ploughing its way through the countryside, all that chalk being removed to make way for it. So it's all very well saying, well, OK, we're going to stop now, we're not going to continue anymore with it. The cost of repairing the landscape, what happens to that 4 miles of tunnels that's already been dug? And it's not just dug, they put in the concrete piping that's going to allow the rail to go through it. It's a massive project. The money it's going to cost to repair the damage that's been done, I mean, the whole thing is an unmitigated
Perhaps
disaster.
a compromise could be that the bits, and this is what I think this report that's been written, this policy exchange report, says that perhaps the bits that haven't already been constructed so far, the lines that haven't been on their way yet, could be stopped. And therefore that might save a bit of money over the long run, because it is extraordinary. They were saying that it would cost about 30 billion. Now they're thinking it's going to cost more than 100. That's probably something.
But Emily,
It's eye-watering.
I mean, I suppose we need to look at this from a future perspective. We are kind of behind from other nations, certainly in terms of our infrastructure and what we've put in place for our transport networks. That needs to be future-proofed. This was part of that plan. Do we not just need to stick with it?
I think we should deliver on what it originally was, which is why it's bonkers, the fact that it's not going to Leeds anymore. If this was the great plan, if it was to provide a transport route that was catching up with countries like Japan, who've had this kind of infrastructure in for years,
so
then
you would
deliver on it. You have to deliver right the way through.
So you would reinstate the Sheffield to Leeds line and make sure...
What's the point of it?
It does seem like such a tiny little bit.
Isn't that the bit that's useful for levelling up?
Exactly.
London, we've already got a line that goes up to Birmingham and it's quite good. The argument from the government was that it would increase capacity rather than necessarily the speed at which you can get from Birmingham to London. But the problem is that people's preferences have changed. There are fewer people making that commute.
Well, also there's a
else.
huge complaint that actually getting trains from London to the north or even to Scotland are fairly reasonable, fairly easy, very expensive, but you can get it.
Expensive.
The problem is getting from east to west or west to east. It's the sort of Transpennine route that they're really struggling with, which this doesn't really answer. I mean...
Also, the other thing is, because I worked on the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham back in the summer, so my route from the hotel where we were staying to the beach volleyball that I was covering walked past the massive terminal where HS2 is coming into in Birmingham. Now, I know people could turn around and say, well, let's just build another shopping centre, convert it into a shopping centre. But the amount of infrastructure there being built at the moment to welcome HS2 into Birmingham, to the Birmingham terminal, is massive. So we talk about the countryside impact, how you reverse that. Well, what do you do with that in Birmingham? You've got a massive white elephant right in the centre of Birmingham. They have to deliver on this now. They can't keep chopping and changing. They can't keep deciding, actually, it's going to finish here and not there. It's bonkers. So much money's been spent already. They've got to finish it now.
Let's find out what our viewers think. John from County Durham, do you think that they should go ahead with HS2, or is it time to just call it quits?
It's definitely time to call it quits, because they've reckoned that it's going to cost anything up to £100 billion to finish it off. They haven't spent all of that yet, and it wasn't even necessary to build HS2 in the first place, because the Victorians provided us with a railway from London Marylebone to Manchester in the 19th century, and apart from the bits from London to Aylesbury, it was all abandoned. Sadly, the place where we really do need high-speed railways in this country is between Manchester, Bradford, Leeds and Northallerton, across the Transpennine route, where the service is appalling and the train service is very slow because of the nature of the area it goes through. HS2, they're now talking about it not going into Euston, so people in London are going to have to get on the tube to go to Old Oak Common, which is just outside of Paddington, by the way, and get off the train at a place called Curzon Street in Birmingham, so they won't even be anywhere near New Street Station in Birmingham, where everybody else has to go to try and get beyond the end of the line to finish their journey.
I mean, it's not looking good, John, but maybe we take the other approach, Simon's approach, and actually we dig our heels in, we put more money in and we make sure that it gets to Leeds. Maybe we extend it and make it Transpennine and have it going across the country as well. We just put all our money in here and make sure we have the best railway network that the world has ever seen.
But the bit of the Transpennine piece won't happen, because we'll have wasted all what money we have got building a railway between London and Birmingham, which we didn't need.
I can see you feel no optimism for this, John, at all. I hear you. Thank you very much for your call. Paul from North Warwickshire, are you feeling a little bit more optimistic about HS2?
Not in the slightest. I mean, it's something that should never have started in the first place. I mean, a speed train to get to Manchester a few minutes quicker. I mean, you're not going to do anything in a few minutes anyway. And it's just destroying everywhere that used to be a beautiful countryside.
But it's already destroyed it. These ancient woodlands have already been destroyed. These houses have been knocked down. I remember there was an apple tree they were trying to protect. That's probably long gone. So you can't grow that 200-year-old tree again. That's done. So we may as well just keep going.
Yeah, but I mean, the whole infrastructure of the whole lot, it's costing billions that it shouldn't be costing. We moan about the NHS. Put it there instead. You know, that's going to do some good for everybody, not this train that's not going to do anything.
But what about the cost of trying to repair what we've already damaged, Paul?
Well, that's what you've got to take into account as well. It's got to be one of those things where, whoever's at the top of the tree in the accounts department of the government at this time, whoever that's going to be, and we don't know, needs to maybe draw a line under it and then just say, look, that was like a bad street that we went down. Forget it now. Let's start again and do something different.
Tell you what, in the list of jobs you wouldn't want to have, being the accountant for HS2 might top that list.
I mean, it is quite extraordinary what they're spending. They've spent hundreds of thousands on diversity and inclusion jobs. There's reports coming out that the economic benefit of it won't make up for the cost.
We're going to get to all of this in just a moment after the break. Thank you, Paul, for your call. The Sun is reporting that the high-speed line linking London to the north might not actually reach central London, but in the last few minutes, Chancellor Jeremy Hunt has just insisted that it will reach Euston. So, Emily, does that change your thinking?
I mean, how did he manage to just insist
He was watching the show.
Watching this?
He decided something had to be done.
I need to put those guys right.
I mean, it makes it slightly more passable, but I do think at this point, the fact that it is just so over budget, so over time. I think originally it was supposed to be done by now. if I'm right, or in the next couple of years. And
well, this is the other thing. This is future-proofing our transport network. But actually, Simon, by the time it gets done, it's probably going to be old technology.
Exactly. I reckon the 162 million that Bieber's just sold his music for would get you about 100 yards on HS2.
Right, somebody get on the phone to Justin, see if we'll put some money forward.
But coming back to something we were talking about earlier when Emily was talking about the extra costs, living around the area, because it's been so controversial, the amount of security guards at every gate into every area that they're working through the Chilterns, huge numbers of guys in the orange coats.
Presumably they need that because of protests against it.
Absolutely, but that's again, and I'd love to see the cost for that, just for security. It's
another discussion to be had as to why when we do these big projects in this country, they always spiral out when it comes to the budgets. They just can't keep to a budget. Carl from Dumfries in Galloway, what's your views on this? It's not going that far, mind you, it was never supposed to.
Well, realistically speaking, and hi Storm, you always put a smile on my day.
Delighted. That makes it worth getting up in the morning, Carl.
Realistically speaking, okay, if we'd have started in Leeds and Manchester and gone south, the project would definitely have made it to London. But it's starting at London, and it hasn't got any further north than Birmingham. And all our transport problems are between Leeds and Manchester, and there is no fix. So as far as the government is concerned with regards to levelling up,
you don't think
this is supposed to be levelling up?
So would you have... Here's a question for you, since you're in Dumfries and Galloway. Would you rather the HS2 had started in Birmingham, because actually Birmingham to London on the train's not that difficult, started in Birmingham and went all the way up to past Dumfries and Galloway, up to Glasgow, or even further potentially, Oban?
Yes, of course it should.
And you think that would have helped levelling up more?
But they were using rail lines that were already used, that were already in existence. Why build another rail line, plough down a whole bunch of houses in order to go nowhere?
Well, that's an engineering question, Carl. I certainly don't have the answer to it.
I think that's a really good point that Carl makes. Interesting question. Had the work begun at the northern end of the line, and then there were questions being raised about, I'm not sure it's going to reach all the way to London. That's never even a question. It was always going to come to London. So if you'd started there, I wonder whether we'd seen the reverse ferreting at the level we have.
I just think it's crazy. If you look at the statistics, something like half of the benefit they're saying is going to be for London and the South East. London and the South East is already a relatively very rich area of the country. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me.
Carl, thank you very much for your call. I think we can now hear from Chancellor Jeremy Hunt. Let's see what he has to say.
Are you, as Chancellor and your government, committed to the HS2 high-speed line all the way to Euston, its original endpoint?
Yes, we are, and I don't see any conceivable circumstance in which that would not end up at Euston. And indeed, I prioritised HS2 in the autumn statement. We have not got a good record in this country of delivering complex, expensive infrastructure quickly. But I'm incredibly proud that for the first time in this last decade under a Conservative government, we have shovels in the ground, we are building HS2, and we're going to make it happen.
So he's proud. What do you make of that, Simon?
Shovels in the ground? I've seen things bigger than shovels.
Not sure he's actually been doing the work himself somehow.
Yeah.
I think he's covering himself, because I think what they've said, the bosses have said that they're considering pushing back the Euston terminus to 2038. I mean, it could be 15 years before we have a Euston terminal. I mean,
yes, exactly. So even if they do get it there, it could be in 2050.
I'll be able to use an old people's rail card on it by the time it's finished.
Well, that'll be helpful. At least you'll get cheaper rail travel. Here's the other question.
Every cloud.
Part of HS2 is to reduce the price of the tickets. It's meant to be more environmentally friendly, take more capacity, but also to make things cheaper for us. Do we believe with the price that's costing to build this thing that that's going to happen?
No. Does anyone?
No. I do hope that it has good Wi-Fi on it.
Normally we have disagreement on that.
And a good trolley service.
To be fair, London to Manchester at the moment is pretty unreliable.
Yeah.
Most of the time you are shoved onto another train because one of them's been cancelled, and then everyone doesn't have a ticket and everyone doesn't have a seat. So it is bad. So more capacity could be a good thing, but I think this line is just a a sham.
Let's see if we can find someone that's a little bit more optimistic about HS2. We'll speak to Mark from Worcestershire. What's your views on this?
We should definitely keep it going. Don't scrap it. It's a misapprehension that the line is being built to get people backwards and forwards from Birmingham to London 20 minutes quicker. It was built to free up the existing line for heavy goods trains, so more and more heavy goods could be transported up and down the country and taken off the roads. One HGV train can take 40 containers. That's 40 lorries that aren't going on the road.
So do you actually think, because Mark, it's getting a lot of protests from environmentalists that are saying, you know, this is terrible and they're cutting through ancient woodland and all the rest of it. But you're actually saying that if this got built, it could be more environmentally friendly. OK,
so for starters, HS2...
We're listening, Mark.
HS2 have already planted 1 million trees since the start of the construction. A lot of the construction is overground. Not on the ground. It's raised above the ground. There's lots of the track going under the ground, under tunnels.
Yeah. Yep.
So I don't think it's having a huge environmental impact at all.
Well, you've mentioned the trees that they planted. I wonder how many trees they chopped down.
Well, hopefully they're replacing more than they're actually taking down, and also more environmentally friendly because there's going to be less lorries on the road transporting heavy goods vehicles.
Well, if they finish it, Mark, that's yet to be seen. That might actually be the reality of it, which would be fantastic. Thank you very much for your call. Maureen from London, do you think this is going to take more heavy goods off our roads and actually be long-term more environmentally friendly?
Yeah, possibly it could be long-term environmentally friendly, but even the proposition or to even have a conversation about stopping this project midstream is total nonsense because the damage has been done. There's no reparation that could compensate for all of the trees, all of the woodland, all of the nature reserves that have been damaged through this, all of the individual upset that's been caused to the residents living on the actual site. Some may as well live on the site. It's just unrealistic to think that that's going to stop. They need to be absolutely up their game and get the project finished.
Maureen, so you're kind
I didn't want it to happen, but obviously it's happening. Yeah, so the reality is it's going to happen.
You're kind of with Simon on this one. Emily, what about that? It's not just the cost, it's just the upheaval. It's just, you know, I mean, people have been devastated by this, having to sell their house, so just get it done and we'll see what benefits we can get out of it.
Well, I mean, you could argue that if they stopped now, there would be less upheaval in terms of the line that they haven't constructed yet, which will bring about more distress for some people and will cost huge amounts. So I think the key point is just how much money is being spent on this. They're talking about how inflation is rising the costs even more. It is tens of billions of pounds. It's a huge amount of money in a cost of living crisis when there are so many better projects to spend on. It's just another example of how the government gets these things so badly wrong time and time again.
But the biggest distress has already been caused because in terms of the work that I saw in Birmingham, that's inner city work. We're used to inner city construction projects. It doesn't really disturb that many people's lives. It's the thoroughway through the countryside that has, you know, destroyed people's livelihoods. I've got a friend who owns a farm in that region. He just looks out at this massive amount of work on the hilltop, constant noise during the daytime. Repairing that, taking it back to how it was, it's a little bit like getting planning permission for a massive new tower block right in the centre of town. Everyone's against it, but it goes ahead. And then they get 3/4 of the way up and decide it's a bad idea. What do? Just leave the tower block there? Do you just leave this railway there? Do you fill in the holes? Do you fill in the 4-mile tunnels?
But if you realise partway through a project that actually it was a nonsense and that it was the wrong thing to do, should you plough on anyway when the cost
but they've
is
already
multiplying
ploughed.
every single day?
That's the problem, they've already ploughed. But a lot of it they have in terms of the countryside.
The government presents it as some kind of job creation scheme. They say, 22,000 jobs are supported by this project. And it's like, those jobs would be elsewhere. It's not like they've just disappeared. These people wouldn't necessarily be unemployed if they weren't working on HS2.
Dave from Lancashire, what do you think? Will you be taking the HS2 to London or to Birmingham, or if indeed it gets to Manchester?
I don't think it really matters. As long as it's profitable for those that are running the system, then it'll work. If it's not made profitable, then it'll be scrapped or they'll do something else.
At the moment, we're hearing...
The whole system is based around profit, so...
But, Dave, at the moment, we're hearing actually they're thinking that the benefits back to us is 90 pence to every pound that's spent on it. So we're already losing 10 pence to every pound, if that's to be believed, in which case it's not very profitable. But if it's good for the environment long term, maybe it's worth the money.
Well, the money won't get spent unless those that control the purse strings are making something out of it. That's how this whole world works.
Oh.
If it's not profitable for people that are running the systems, then the whole thing will be scrapped. It won't work. It'll get changed or whatever needs to be done. And we're just the ones at the end of the chain that get whatever comes to us.
It could just be subsidised more and more by the taxpayer. They'll keep it going regardless.
I mean, at the end of the day, Dave, it's us that they're paying for it already, and the costs are skyrocketing for us. So who do you think's profiteering out of this?
I don't know. I don't know who's behind it. I've got no idea. The government, well, government will profit, but the whole world runs on a system where governments do what they're told, and if something is profitable, then it goes ahead, and if it's not, it doesn't. And they sit between us and the hierarchy that run the whole planet, and that's how the system works. It works on everything that's going in this world, not just for HS2 or climate change or petrol cars or whatever. The system won't change, or it won't change until the system changes.
Interesting theory, Dave. Thank you very much for your call.
The chief execs are on big salaries.
So you think
what he's talking about.
they're making money?
Yeah, they're making money out of it. It's in their interest.